So I would like to start off by talking about your fantastic new single, Hair. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the meaning and about the recording itself.
Yeah, so my new song Hair is actually a remake of the classic song Hair by Larry Graham. He wrote me a couple of years ago. He texted me and said, "Hey, I think it would be a great idea if you remake Hair because it's perfect for you. You're used to wearing your hair in all these different styles and kind of like when I first started out on this journey of being this bass crazy, bass player artist, I was wearing like mohawks and everything. So I had all these different kind of hairstyles and I feel like I've been known for my crazy hair over the years. So I decided to remake this song and I didn't want to do it exactly how Larry did it. I wanted to put my own touch on it. I slowed it down a bit. I made it sexy. I put an envelope filter on the bass and I just created something that felt brand new. So I'm really excited for this song release.
One of your most famous hairstyles, if not the most famous, is the iconic treble clef mohawk. Um, how did
Bass clef,
you?
yes.
Yes, bass clef mohawk. Sorry, a bass clef mohawk, of course, a bass clef mohawk. Um, how did you come? How did you get the idea to have that hairstyle? Because it looks very elaborate and very tricky to do, I suppose.
Yeah, so I was doing a photo shoot one day and I was just gonna wear my natural hair, just let my hair be wild and crazy, curly like it is now. And I was gonna kind of like pull it up on the sides and like let the curls hang down. And then I saw that a friend of mine named Andy Allo, she was working with Prince at the time. Her album had just come out and she kind of had her hair the exact same way. So I said, "Oh my God." I'm in the photo shoot at that moment. I said, "Okay, we can't do that hairstyle because I do want to be different. I do want to be a little bit unique. So let's do anything. Let's do anything else." And so I saw this purple hair just kind of like sitting in my hairstylist bag. She just had this like purple hair. And I was like, "What about that purple hair?" And she's just like, "Oh, that's just so extreme. I don't know. I don't know." I'm like, "Let's try it and see." So she just kind of like put it on me. She knew nothing about a bass clef, nothing about exactly how we wanted to design it. She put it on me. I turned sideways. The photographer got a photo, and that became the brands that everybody kind of recognized as Vic West in the beginning.
In the press info for your new single, you also say hair is not only about style, it's also power and its identity. Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Yes, so Hair, her art is revolutionary. That's an acronym. Her art is revolutionary. In the African American community, hair and styling hair is art. Um, Decades ago, centuries ago, a lot of the enslaved people in the US would wear their hair in braids. And in those braids, in those cornrows, there were maps to freedom to help them get from, being in slavery to the land of the free. And I just feel like hair has been a part of our lineage. It's been a part of our story and it's told so many stories over the years. And we have a law in America that was just passed a few years ago called the Crown Act. And the Crown Act, it prohibits people being discriminated against because of wearing their natural hairstyle. So in the workplace and in schools, there were some people that were being suspended from their jobs and suspended from school because their hair was saw as unkept or too wild. So for instance, if I'm wearing my hair like this, or I take my hair down and I'm wearing it in an afro, which is my natural style, I could have gotten suspended if I had a certain type of job instead of just wearing it straight like the majority of people do. So legislature just really passed this law called the Crown Act in order to prohibit people from being discriminated against because of their hair. And I thought that this was a great way to tie in the meaning of what hair means to me and what hair means to just people in our community in general.
you have just mentioned Larry Graham, which is of course one of the godfathers of electric bass and funk bass, and you have already worked with him. Can you talk a bit about the influence he had on you?
Yeah, so I worked with him back in 2017 for the first time. Prince had just passed away, and every time that I met with Prince, hung out with Prince, recorded or did something like that with Prince, he would always say, "I'm getting ready to call Larry Graham because you still haven't met him yet. He needs to know about you." So he would call him, and they were playing phone tag. So anytime that I was there, Larry answered the phone call, and it wasn't until after Prince passed that Larry Graham reached out to me. I was actually on vacation in Jamaica, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I want to work with you. I have a song, and I think it's going to be perfect for you." And we flew to Minneapolis, where Larry Graham lives, and I worked with the godfather of slap bass. And I was so scared. I was so scared that I was like, okay, I'm not going to wear anything that's tight fitting. I need to wear a huge t-shirt, like super big. And you can tell if you go back and look at the photos that it's a really, really big pink t-shirt, because I just felt like I was going to be sweating the whole time while working with this legend. And he is the sweetest man you'd ever want to meet. He taught me so many things on the bass. He taught me about his pedals. He taught me basically what funk means to him. And he said, you know what? We need someone in this new generation that's going to carry the torch of funk. Prince is gone, and I want you to be that person. And so he wrote a song. He wrote a song for me called Thumpalina, because he loved the way that I thump the bass. And that was our first time working together. And we've been, chatting and all of that stuff ever since. And then when he told me to remake Hair, I took it as a challenge, and I really hope he loves it.
Awesome. Apart from him, which bass players have influenced you when you started up with the bass?
Bass players that influenced me, I can't even count on my fingers. There's so many of them, from Marcus Miller to Jaco Pastorius to Rhonda Smith to Carol Kay. Carol Kay, she played bass, she played guitar, all these other things as well. But I just feel like these people were playing songs that are like the soundtracks of so many people's lives. Louis Johnson, who did a lot of things for Michael Jackson, and then of course the Brothers Johnson. So many people have inspired me, and I would say some of the first women that inspired me, like I said, Rhonda Smith. I was just like a little girl watching Rhonda Smith, like just watching the videos and stuff on YouTube. Her, Ida Nielsen, I would watch, and also Tal Wickenfield. So Tal Wickenfield, she came around, and I was like, oh my God, who is this girl? There's this girl. She's young like me. Like, she is playing for Jeff Beck, and she's doing all of these amazing things. I think I can do it too. And I think Tal was the one that really, in my mind, in my heart, I said, okay, if she can do it, I'm going to be able to do something like that too.
There's a whole new generation of young female bass players, including yourself and a lot of other extremely talented women. Is there a sense of camaraderie between you? Because you just mentioned Tal Wickenfield.
Yeah. So and for instance, Tal Wickenfield, of course, Esperanza has always been an inspiration, and I've been friends with her for a long time. I went to her first show that she had in Arizona when I was very, very young. And I just fell in love. And Esperanza and I have been friends for a really long time. Tal Wickenfield as well. I have only met her a few times, but as far as chats and stuff back and forth on social media, she's a very, very nice girl. I would say I have camaraderie also with lots of female bass players, because I kind of set out to find these female bass players and then follow them on social media, because I don't want the narrative that women cannot work together or women cannot applaud each other. And I grew up with lots of sisters, and I've always felt like, okay, even these female bass players, it's like I treat them like my sisters. I love bass players like Blue to Tiger. I think that's how you say her name. Adeline, April K. Like I said, Tall Wickenfield, Mohini Day, who I've known for a really long time. Yeah, so there's just so many women out there that are just killing it right now.
What I always wondered, because also a lot of my favorite bass players are female too, but sometimes you read on social media when guys talk about bass players and give compliments, they say, "You're my favorite female bass player." And I was wondering if it's a bit bothersome because it says either "you're my favorite bass player" and always like the term female in front of it. I was wondering if that's a bit bothersome sometimes.
No, I think for me, it's not bothersome at all because I feel like I understand it. I have so many favorite bass players that every now and then I feel like you do have to kind of put them in a category. Okay, so this is my favorite slap bass player. This is my favorite fusion bass player. Okay, this is my favorite female bass player. I don't find any I don't feel any kind of way about that. I'm just glad to be your favorite. Your favorite.
That's good. What drew you to the bass as a kid in the first place?
What drew me to the bass was, so I started playing guitar when I was 12 years old. So I was playing guitar because my dad played guitar in church, and I've been singing since I was 2 or 3 years old. When I turned 16, I heard Michael Jackson's "You Want to Be Starting Something," and of course I heard this song a million times. It's been out like forever, and I just said, okay, my ears are really tuned into this thing that's going bum 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 bum. And I was like, Dad, what is that? What is that deep sound? And he said, that's a bass. And I said, okay, that's what I want to play. I want to play that. So I just feel like it hit me in the chest really hard. And I just knew that I was gonna love it.
And how did you proceed then? How did you start learning it?
Well, so we went to the same day I asked about it. We went to a pawn shop. My dad bought me, I don't know, $50 or $100 bass. And it was a 5 string. So my first bass was a 5 string bass. And we went home and he just started showing me some things. He said, okay, so this is the blues. And he taught me a bass line that sounded like boom, 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 boom. And I worked on that and worked on that and worked on that until I figured it out. But the problem was I'm left-handed. He had bought me a right-handed bass. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm playing guitar the other kind of way. And like guitar was more of a hobby. I wasn't really serious about it. So I never really thought about this. But I noticed and he noticed that my right hand was very, very slow because I'm left-handed. So I said, okay, maybe can we flip it around? Can we do something else like with the guitar? And he's like, well, this is a right hand guitar bass, and you're gonna learn how to play it right-handed because he was right-handed. He could stand behind me and show me a couple of things. So from that point on, I just kind of worked with a metronome over and over again. He took me to church. And like I said, I grew up in the church, and he said, okay, we're going to take your bass. He took my bass, he took my amplifier, and he said, all right, we're going to go up here and you're going to play the bass. And I'm like, I don't know what to play. I don't know these songs. He's like, use your ears. And I feel like that taught me how to play by ear, and I've been playing by ear ever since. I learned how to read much, much later on, and I was playing by ear first before anything else.
It's very interesting. How important do you think it is for actually for people to read, for bassists to read in everyday practical life?
It depends on what you want to do as a bass player. So if you want to work for instance, like Hans Zimmer, because I've done a few auditions and few things for Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer found out about me through Dave Stewart and a cellist that he was working with. And if you want to do things like that, yes, you must learn how to read. You want to do movies, you want to do soundtracks and things like that. You will definitely want to learn how to read music. Also, way back in the day when they had the Jay Leno show, I was super, super young, and I was able to sit on set with the band and watch them during their rehearsal. Every single person had music in their hands, and they were reading it right on the spot. So they were getting the music on a Monday, and I think they were doing the rehearsal on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and then going live, I think, that night. So at that point, I was like, oh, okay, so that means if I want to do this sort of stuff, I really need to learn how to read music. But I think overall, it's more about the feel and it's more about playing songs. Because I feel like if you learn how to play songs, you're going to learn different techniques that you're not going to learn by reading by reading the music. So I guess I learned it right, where I learned how to play first, play with feel, play using my ears, and then I learned how to read later.
I've read somewhere, and correct me if that's wrong, that you started practicing Chacos. I think it was Teen Town or something, but I've read that you started practicing Chaco Pastorius quite early on. So you did it all transcribing it by ear then. Was it
Yes,
in that phase? Yeah.
yes, yes. So I was in my bedroom listening to the Jaco Pastorius. I wanted to learn Teen Town because somebody said, oh, if you learn Teen Town, then that means you can really play the bass, whatever that means. So I said, okay, then I need to learn Teen Town. I sat down, and of course, it's fast moving. And I'm like, okay, how am I going to learn how to play this? And I just kind of like slowed it down and I took it step by step. And then I just learned how to play it, because if you had shown me the sheet music or even tab, I would not have known what I was looking at. I would not have known how to play the song, which would have made it a lot easier, I think. But yeah, that was one of the first kind of like difficult songs I learned how to play early on. Yeah.
What was your first professional job then as a bass player?
My first professional job was working for a man named Dave Stewart, and he is one half of Eurythmics. Um, I was I wrote a song called Black Beauty, and he heard it. Somehow he heard it, and he decided to call me. He got my number from one of the Fender reps because I had just gotten my first endorsement, and of all companies, Fender. So I was put on their website, and Dave Stewart really loved my song because they had also put it on my website, or their website as well. He loved my song. He loved what I could bring to his band. And he called me and he says, hello, I want to speak to Nikki West. And I said, this is Nikki West. He said, this is Dave Stewart. And honestly, I didn't know at the time who Dave Stewart was. But after I got off the phone with him, I did my research and I said, oh my God, Sweet Dreams are made of this. Sweet Dreams. Oh, I've heard this song a million times before. And then I realized how important this person was. And I would say, yeah, that was my very first professional gig. He flew me from Arizona, because that's where I'm from, to LA. And we played a few gigs and recorded some songs in the studio.
It's pretty awesome to have your first professional job already with a music legend, because that's what
Yes.
he is.
Yes.
So how was it for you then when you went into a studio with him?
I was nervous as always. This is gonna be the recurring theme of the interview. Is I was really nervous at first. Um, but Dave Stewart, like he's just so cool. Like he's just so just I feel like he's amazing at working with young artists. He's amazing at working with female artists and just kind of like bringing the best out of us. I feel like first time I worked with him, I was also working with Glenn Ballard, who wrote or co-wrote Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror. So I was kind of like, I was definitely in the presence of greatness at this time. So I had no choice but to try to level up and be great just like them. And I just did what I do best. We recorded in the studio, and the first thing that we did was we laid down vocals, which I'm like, oh, vocals, that's easy for me. I got that. And then we laid down the bass lines, and they're very simple. When I look back on it, compared to the things that I did later on in the future, recording these bass lines and these vocals were very, very simple and a lot of fun.
And when did you start to write yourself?
Oh my God, I've been writing since I was a child, maybe a teenager, actually. Just been writing songs. I think the first thing that I wrote was a song about my dog. I was 12 years old. I was 10 years old. I was in the fifth grade, and we had to write a poem about something that made us happy. And me and my mom, we sat down at the table. And in order for me to memorize poems, and in order for me to memorize something that I was supposed to memorize in a book or some sort of math problem, we would always make a song out of it. So we'd make a rap out of it. And that was my very first song that I wrote. It was a rap about my two dogs, and I had to recite it in front of the class, but I had to recite it as a poem, not as a rap or as a song. But I was singing it in my head as I was reciting it in front of the class, and I realized then that I really loved writing.
Awesome. You're also passing the knowledge and offering a course called Bass Domination on your website. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that course and what you try to convey to younger bass players or to beginners of any age in that case.
Yes,
Also.
yes, beginners of any age. And I find that to be such a cool thing because I have absolutely worked with kids like in schools, or I would kind of like come to a show and tell of like my niece or other children and show kids how to play the bass. And my course was kind of like a different thing where there are people of all ages learning how to play the bass for the very first time. So I think that it takes a lot of restraint as a bass player that can play all of these crazy things to be able to take it and slow it down and make it so easy that a 5-year-old can understand it. And that's what my course is about. It's for the bass player that has never picked up a bass before and is wanting to learn from A to Z how to play the bass. It is a huge success. I did not know that that's what people really wanted. I assumed that my course would be more likable or more sellable to the people that were already bass players that wanted to learn a style, a slap bass style. But it so happens that the beginners are definitely the biggest market for what I do.
You just mentioned interesting thing that even if your technique is very good to simple it down to make it understandable to a 5-year-old, I think that's a valuable lesson for any advanced musician sometimes, because it often seems that it's very hard for great musicians to play something easy, I suppose, in some regards.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I found. So before I started to do this course, I just keep getting people asking me, "Hey Nick, do you do courses? Hey, do you teach bass lessons? Hey, can I want to learn from you?" And I was on tour and doing all of this stuff, recording, working with different artists and things like that. So I never really had the time. And so when the pandemic hit, I had already had half of the videos filmed. I said, okay, now I have the time to really film the second half of this course. And the job that I had before I became a musician, when I first moved to LA, I was tutoring students. So I was always very good at math, very good at calculus. And my job was to teach kids and teach high schoolers and people that were in college how to do calculus or how to do math or algebra. And so I feel like that's probably the thing that I'm best at, is teaching a hard concept and making it easy. And when I was learning how to play the bass, I was looking all over YouTube. Like I would see these amazing bass players and I would ask them, show me this or show me that. And even when they were breaking it down, it was still too hard to understand. It's like, okay, you just did that. Wait, I don't understand. And then I would kind of shut down and not be interested anymore because I didn't feel like they understood me. So I wanted to make sure that I understood these beginners learning how to play bass.
I'm very interested when you get to work with somebody who asks you to play bass on his record. What's your learning process of a song? If you get to know a new piece of music and you should lay down a bass track for it, what's your inner process like?
It definitely depends on the artist that I'm working with and what that artist has given to me as the message. So some people, they'll hire me for two different things. One, I want Nick West, and everything that Nick West brings, I want her to just do that on my track. So most of the people know that if Nick West is going to do something, whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to make it sound a little, have pocket and make it sound really funky, right? Some people want me to do a bass solo. Like I want to feature you and I want you to do this crazy bass solo and it's just right in this section right here. So I will do all of Nick West during that bass solo part of the song. That's one side. The other side is there's an artist, and I will say, for instance, in the beginning when I was working with Dave Stewart, he was coming out with a country album. So he wanted to do a whole country thing. And I said to myself, okay, he wants to do a country thing. That's not funk. That's not funky. So what I need to do is study all the country greats. And I need to make sure that when I approach this bass line, that I approach it authentically. What do country bass lines sound like? What is the tone like? What bass should I use? Should I use the P bass? Should I use the jazz bass? Should I use something else? And I think that that's what I feel like makes a great bass player, or somebody that's going to be playing for other artists as well, is if you can play all of these different styles authentically. That means you've studied all these different styles, you've really used your ears, listened to the tones. I'm a tone geek. And you're able to bring them what they need for that particular project.
So you got to do your research, so
Yes.
to say. Yeah. What was it like the first time to get to hang out with Prince on a musical basis?
Oh, musical basis. Okay. So on a musical basis, okay, the first time that I hung out with Prince, I can't really call it a hang because it was the very first time that I met him. And I was kind of auditioning. I guess I was auditioning because he just would say, you know, come to Paisley Park and let's jam. Okay, let's jam means it's not like just a jam session. This is an audition. And I feel like I was, once again, scared. I was so scared that it paralyzed me from being able to really do what I do best because I could not focus. I couldn't believe that I was there. So yeah, the very first time for me was scary. And I don't think that he got to see my best playing. I did my funky thing, but because I was thinking so much and all of these things were going on in my body, I could not really fully give my full authentic self. He offered me the job anyway, but I kind of felt like I failed a little bit because I wasn't 100% on. That was my first time musically with Prince. After that, it was leaps and bounds much better, but that was crazy.
Is there a point working with somebody like that when you just forget that he's Prince, or when you stop kind of caring that he's Prince, but he's just a colleague and you got to do your thing and he got to do his thing?
Yes and no. So you never quite forget that this is Prince. You never quite forget that this is a legend. The crazy thing to me about that was Prince was what, like in his 50s? In his 50s, right? And he knows everybody. So, you know, from Sheila E. to everybody that he could possibly work with or collaborate with. And he chose to work with us 20-year-olds and bring us in and kind of teach us, but then let us take the reins and like show him what we're working on, show him what we thought was cool at the time. And I thought that was so admirable because sometimes when you get to a certain age or when you get to a certain place in life, you're not really willing to take the chance on people that might be a whole lot more amateur than you know. So I thought that was great. But I would say that, yeah, you never forget that this is a freaking legend that you're standing in front of. And then on the other hand, I don't know, I can't speak for other people, but for me, you know, every time I went around Prince, I just kind of felt this sense of like nervousness. And then he told me, he says, "You're putting me on a pedestal. Stop putting me on a pedestal because I am human just like you. I'm talented, you're talented, we're all talented. The only difference is I'm more famous, I have more money, and you know, people just know me. But you are very talented." And he's like, "And I'm telling you, if you were born when I was born, you would be a rocket. You would be a complete superstar already." And so he kind of told me to stop putting him on a pedestal, and I calmed down inside and I stopped doing that. And then the next meetings that we had and the parties that he invited me to and stuff, I just ran up to him like he was my cousin, like, oh, hey boo, how you doing? And I would give him a hug and then, go on about my business. And that was when it was like, okay, this is going from, oh my God, he's a legend and I'm down here, to now we're friends. Now we have established a rapport that seems more normal, more natural for me.
And how was it like, because he was so good on almost every instrument, including the bass. So how was the exchange like on that level? Did you kind of trade licks, or did he have particular ideas and give maybe tips at that point?
Yes. So the thing was, and I don't think too many people know about this. I mean, I've said it in an interview, I think, before. But after Prince offered me the job to be one of the bass players in his band, I went back to my hotel and I knew 100% that I was supposed to be an artist. And the crazy thing is before I met Prince, I had talked with Dave Stewart and we went through an entire kind of like um, blueprints of what we wanted to do for me as an artist and how we wanted to brand me as an artist, because he said, you're a singer first and you're a bass player second. I think people need to know that, and people need to get to hear you sing, and then you add in the bass second. And then I felt like when I went to Paisley Park the first time and Prince offered me the job, it was kind of a test. This is something that I always wanted. I always wanted to play with Prince. I always wanted to be part of the band. But knowing the conversation that Dave Stewart and I had worked on just previously, I knew that my calling was to be an artist. And so I told Prince, I'm really an artist. I want to be an artist. So that's what I want to work on. And so he said, okay, he respected that. And the next time that I came back to Paisley Park, he had the band work on my songs. So there are some songs that he had chosen of mine that he really wanted the band to work on. And in that, he said, okay, Nick, you play bass. What I want you to do is I want you to switch to guitar. Give this person the bass. And then he kind of would like switch us and put us on different instruments just to kind of I don't know, make me feel crazy, because I'm kind of like, well, bass is my main instrument. Like, I don't know. Okay, now you want me to go play the piano? Oh my God. And so I realized then, like, okay, he's a master of all of these things. And he wants us to be a master of these things as well. And I feel like when he would talk to me about this, it's like, you will write songs on the bass that sound like you wrote songs on the bass. But if you go and you sit at a piano, you may write a whole different type of song. It may feel different to you, and you're going to write something that is going to just feel different to the person that's listening. And so I think rather than us trading licks and kind of like doing that on instruments, it was more about him teaching me as an artist about songwriting and how to approach writing different songs on different instruments.
When you went into the studio for your last record, you already had lots and lots of experience in the studio under your sleeve, so to say. What were the most valuable studio lessons you've learned?
Okay, so we can talk about Moody and we can talk about my first album, Just in the Nick of Time. That's I learned a lot. Okay. Not just as a vocalist, because I feel like as a vocalist, it's like, okay, sing, breathe, do those things. But as a bass player, as a musician, there's a whole different approach to playing in the studio on a record than it is to playing live. Live, you have room to, I don't know, kind of make a little bit of mistakes, just play live and go crazy, and just kind of, it's more about how the music really feels to the audience, what they're looking at, because I feel like the audience also hears with their eyes. They hear with their eyes as well. But in the studio, you don't have that opportunity. The only opportunity you have is to capture somebody right away with their ears. And playing the bass in the studio, it's like you have to learn how to be robotic but still sound like a human. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you've got to play to a click track or play to a metronome or play to a drummer. Most of the time it's to a click track and a drum. And be right on that click. Like bang, you know, and really kind of sounding robotic. And I learned when I was recording my very first album that I didn't have it. I couldn't figure out how to just lock in with that click and just record without thinking about, oh my God, there's the click. The click is supposed to disappear eventually. So I feel like in the studio over the years, that was the most important thing that I learned, because there's so many musicians out there that can play so great and so amazing. But when they get into the studio, it just doesn't sound the way that it should sound. And I think that's the biggest thing I learned over there.
Yeah, the click can be your enemy at times if
Yes.
you're not completely trying to be his friend. So do you think it's important to practice with a metronome all the time then?
Yes, absolutely. After doing my first album and discovering that I sucked at this, I decided to, every single time that I picked up my bass, that metronome would be on. Like I said, when I learned Teen Town, the metronome was on, and it was very, very slow. But if I could play it slow, then eventually I could play it fast. And I feel like my aunt, who I lived with at the time when I first moved to LA as a super young girl, she tells me now to this day, all I did was all I remember is hearing that thing go tick tock all day, all night. So I would practice for 8 hours. I would sit in that room and I would have that metronome on and I would practice until I got it right. I still do that to this day. I still practice with a click.
It's interesting because there's this controversy about Jeff Berlin, who always claims that bass players shouldn't practice with a click because you should be your own click, and then half the bass world is going against that and say that's complete nonsense. So your suggestion is click is important for that.
Yes, I say absolutely practice with a click, because you are the rhythm. If you cannot lock in with the drummer, because you just have no concept of, then that's a problem. And I naturally have good rhythm. I naturally have good feel. I naturally, can clap, sing, dance, all of those things. But it's a whole different thing when you're playing with a band, you're playing with somebody else. You have to make sure that you're locked in. And so that's why I think you should play with the metronome for sure. At least starting out, practice with the metronome and then let the drummer have the click and then you just play to him or her.
You'll be coming to Berlin soon to play a show, and I was wondering what can fans expect from that show?
I will be coming to Berlin. Hello, everybody in Berlin. What can fans expect from the show? What do you know about Nick West? Nick West is crazy, right? So you're going to be able to see me put all of my feelings and my emotion and my passion down on stage. So you're going to hear me sing. You're going to see me dance. You're going to hear the bass doing its thing. You're going to get a show. You're not going to get now this may be a little bit different for people that maybe have not seen me before and they see me with the bass in my hand. Sometimes they think that they might be getting kind of like maybe a fusion show or maybe something where I'm on the bass the whole time, just kind of like doing the thing. But you're going to get an artist that sings and then shows you what that bass thing do. So yeah, you're going to get a full, lots of different things at once.
What's next for you? Is there any studio album planned? What's after the tour?
Yeah, so I am, like I said, releasing my song Hair. That comes out June 20th. So make sure you stream that everywhere. And then I am going to be completing my album. So I'm working with Narada Michael Walden, who did a lot of hits with Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey and Stevie Wonder and Larry Graham and Carlos Santana, just all of these amazing artists that come through there. And I think Her, the artist, was there a few months ago as well, working with him. So this is going to be really exciting. This album is going to be a lot of storytelling. You know, most of the time I do things that are like, this is fun. I'm going to write this song because it sounds fun. But I have new experiences. You know, I went through a pandemic. Like my sister went through having cancer and all of that stuff. I became a mother. I'm a new mother, all of those things. And I have experiences and stories to tell that I feel is going to resonate even more with people on this next album.
And do you have any idea when it will come out? Is it planned for 26 or?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
planned for 2026. So yes, the first single, like I said, is Hair, and then we've got subsequent singles coming up after that. And get ready for 26.
Awesome. Yeah, hey, then thank you so much for taking the time and for such an interesting conversation. It was really fascinating.
Thank you so much. I'll see you soon.